A light mist from the end of the day still lingered on the road surface when Elias Moran vanished in the Warehouse District, New Orleans, population over 300,000. The June night arrived with a summer rain that blurred the lights along Julius Street. At 11:33 p.m., Elias's neighbor, Mr. Deese, Bernard Lacey, saw him pass by the living room window, still holding the old lighter he had just returned to Caleb after their meeting at the bar. Elias was crossing the narrow stretch of sidewalk separating the row of Uptown houses from the southern industrial area, the route he took every evening. Mr. Lacey watched Elias's figure merge into the rain, the light-colored shirt the last bright streak before it was swallowed by the thick darkness of the Warehouse District. What happened in the following 58 minutes would haunt New Orleans for more than 3 decades. Before diving deeper into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest cases. New Orleans in 1975 was still a city blending music, the steam of the Mississippi River, and decaying industrial zones, creating an atmosphere that was both lively and tinged with the characteristic gloom of the southern port. In that context, Elias Moran, 21 years old, a student who also worked part-time in the cargo unloading area, living with his family in Uptown, was regarded as calm and rarely caused trouble. Elias's closest friends were Caleb Hargrove, 22, an outgoing and sometimes impulsive young man, and Jonah Ellis, 21, quieter in temperament, often pulled into the underlying tensions that always existed between the two friends. On the evening of June 14, 1975, the three met at a small bar on Julius Street, a place frequented by dock workers and students. The meeting was unremarkable, except that a few patrons said they felt the atmosphere around the group was somewhat tense, as if an important conversation had taken place before anyone noticed. The times the three left the bar did not align. Caleb left first, Jonah lingered a few minutes, while Elias left last and walked alone toward the road leading to the Warehouse District. That was the last time anyone saw Elias. His family, accustomed to their son's clear schedule, immediately sensed something wrong when Elias did not return home after midnight. By dawn, with hours passing and no sign of contact, they proactively called Elias's friends, including Caleb and Jonah, but no one knew where Elias was. A few neighbors were asked, but no one had seen any movement around the Moran house that night. Anxiety grew rapidly as sunrise came, and Elias still had not returned. His parents drove the routes Elias usually took, checked parking lots, nearby gas stations, and called friends again, hoping for the smallest clue. But all efforts were in vain. There was no sign of an accident, no call with news, and no clear indication of where Elias had gone after leaving the bar. By late morning on June 15, after all spontaneous search efforts yielded no sign of Elias, the family was forced to contact NOPD and report him missing. Just a few hours later, around noon that day, the case was transferred to the Missing Persons Unit with medium priority per procedure. But the urgency conveyed through the family's account quickly drew more attention from investigators than usual. The initial report clearly stated the last time Elias was seen, around after 11 p.m., leaving the bar on Julius Street alone, walking toward the warehouse area near the docks. No record of transportation or anyone accompanying him. The duty investigator, Sergeant Raymond LeBlanc, began by establishing a preliminary search radius of 1 mile around the bar area, extending toward the routes leading back to Uptown where Elias lived and down into the Warehouse District with its many narrow passages, steel staircases, flickering streetlights, and frequently abandoned areas. The family provided Elias's daily routine, the walking route he took from downtown back home, places he occasionally stopped, his work hours at the cargo docks, and the fact that he almost never suddenly changed his route. Elias's simple and regular travel habits allowed police to easily narrow down possibilities while ruling out the chance he had voluntarily left without telling anyone, something the family insisted did not match his personality. When reviewing those present on the night Elias disappeared, NOPD quickly identified Caleb Hargrove and Jonah Ellis as the last two people to see Elias alive. Both were listed as subjects of interest, not because of evidence of guilt, but because they held central positions in the victim's final timeline. Caleb leaving the bar first, Jonah shortly after, and Elias last created a need for investigators to clarify what actually happened in the roughly 20-minute unsupervised window, especially since bar patrons described the atmosphere among the three as somewhat tense. Investigator LeBlanc requested more detailed interviews with the family to reconstruct background elements. Had Elias shown any unusual behavior beforehand? Had he mentioned meeting Caleb or Jonah with any odd attitude? Were there arguments, unresolved issues, or changes in the relationship among the three? Elias's parents stated they knew of nothing unusual, but his younger sister mentioned she had once seen him and Caleb having a tense conversation a few weeks earlier without knowing the reason. When asked about Jonah, the family only recalled that he often came over but was quiet and never caused trouble. From here, the case began forming key focus points to guide the search direction. Elias disappeared on a narrow, poorly lit stretch of road with many turns leading into the warehouse area. He had no vehicle, no reason to leave the bar alone at night, and his two close friends were the last witnesses. The investigation team established a long search perimeter along the axis from Julia Street to St. Rebel, Charles Avenue, including old drainage systems, vacant lots near the riverbank, unmanaged parking lots, and warehouse rows 3 to 7, which have been reported as gathering spots for many casual laborers and transients. Some other investigators checked lists of assaults or muggings in the area over the past 3 months for similar patterns, but found no matching data. Police also cross-checked security cameras, but in 1975 New Orleans, there was virtually no public surveillance system. Most relied on scattered eyewitness accounts, greatly limiting the initial timeline reconstruction. In the end-of-day internal report, Sergeant LeBlanc noted that Elias Moran may have met with an incident within a roughly 600-meter radius around the warehouse district, an area large and complex enough to conceal many scenarios without leaving clear traces. With this assessment, NOTTD officially opened an active search file, placing Elias on the high-risk missing list and identifying Caleb and Jonah as 2 witnesses requiring deeper questioning in subsequent steps. Immediately afterward, that same afternoon, the investigation team began the most critical task in the first 48 hours, reconstructing Elias's full final timeline by returning to the bar on Julia Street, where he was last seen, and gathering accounts from staff and patrons present the previous night. The bar owner confirmed that Elias and his 2 friends, Caleb Hargrove and Jonah Ellis, arrived around 9 p.m., sat at a table in the back near the jukebox, and did not draw special attention except for a small argument among the 3 that made the owner glance over a few times to ensure no physical altercation occurred. A waitress said Caleb left earlier than the other 2, around close to 10:40, appearing hurried, heading toward the main door opening onto Chopitulis Avenue. About 5 to 7 minutes later, Jonah paid his share and got up to leave through the south side door, heading toward the streetcar stop on St. Charles Avenue. However, another patron remembered Jonah leaving later, causing the team to notice inconsistencies in the timing. When asked about Elias, everyone confirmed he left the bar last, sometime after 11 p.m., but no one clearly recalled which direction he walked except a vague description that he walked very slowly, as if thinking about something. To strengthen the timeline, police continued to neighboring shops and collected statements from homeless people and night shift workers in the warehouse district. A man sleeping near an overpass said he saw 3 young men briefly arguing outside the bar before dispersing, but he was not sure if they were Elias, Caleb, and Jonah. A night shift air conditioning repair shop owner said he saw a young man in a light-colored shirt heading toward the warehouses along South Peters Street around 11:15, matching the time Elias was believed to have left the bar. A taxi driver offered conflicting information, saying he saw a young man matching Elias's description heading toward Uptown. When cross-referenced, NOPD realized most statements lacked precise timing accuracy, as witnesses had no watches or reason to remember specifics. Investigator LeBlanc tasked the team with minute-by-minute timeline analysis from 10:30 to 11:30 p.m., using all statements to find intersections in the descriptions. After the team mapped the full route from Julia Street to the 2 main directions, Uptown and Warehouse District, they noticed an inconsistency. If Elias were heading to Uptown, he would have turned left immediately after leaving the bar to join the main axis. But both the bar waitress and 2 patrons confirmed Elias did not go that way. Instead, he continued straight down the road leading to the warehouse district. Additionally, the air conditioning shop owner's statement, seeing a young man in a similar shirt heading down South Peters, matched a shortcut route many locals used at night through the loading area. Although no physical evidence confirmed it, cross-referencing all sources forced NOPD to conclude that the likelihood Elias chose the direction toward the warehouse district was far higher, especially since the area at that time had many shortcuts but also high risks. While reconstructing the timeline, police also noted a key detail. The initial time points provided by Caleb and Jonah did not fully match witness accounts. Caleb said he left before 10:30, while the waitress remembered close to 10:40. Jonah claimed he left right after Caleb, but 2 witnesses recalled a significant time gap. These discrepancies made the night's timeline impossible to fully align. prompting the team to note this could be natural witness confusion, or something happened among the three that made their accounts disjointed. To avoid missing anything, police flagged all unverified statements in the file and prepared to extend the search deeper into the warehouse district, where street lighting was sparse. Many warehouses operated on irregular hours, and unregistered casual workers frequently appeared. At the end of the workday, the timeline report stated clearly, Elias Moran left the bar after 11 p.m., walking alone, with the most reasonable direction being toward the warehouse district. All other data lacked sufficient reliability for confirmation. The final timeline thus became the main foundation for subsequent search steps. Right after completing the timeline reconstruction and noting multiple discrepancies in witness statements, NOPD still proceeded with an essential investigative step, thoroughly checking the entire familiar route Elias Moran usually walked, from downtown back to Uptown, a path tied to his daily habits for years and meticulously described by the family in the initial meeting. The search team was divided into 3 groups, each responsible for a section of the Uptown grid. The first group checked major intersections from Julia Street toward St. Len's, Charles Avenue. The second scoured unattended parking lots, spots Elias sometimes stopped at for late-night coffee from vending machines. The remaining group followed the old railroad line running parallel to Magazine Street, an area that had seen occasional muggings in recent years. They started early before the New Orleans sun could heat the pavement, hoping to find even the smallest trace before time and foot traffic erased fragile evidence. Every intersection and sidewalk segment was closely examined, from skid marks in mud to small items a person might drop. Though nothing indicated Elias had gone this way, the parking lot team checked every dark corner between vehicles, opened public trash cans, and even asked waiting taxi drivers if they had seen anyone matching Elias's description the previous night. All gave the same answer. No one saw anything unusual. Meanwhile, the old railroad group inspected sections obscured by bushes growing among the tracks, places that could hide traces if Elias had an incident there. But everything was silent, cold, as if Elias had never set foot there. To reinforce the search results, NOPD deployed an additional K-9 team, specialized in tracking missing persons by scent, using Elias's personal items to follow his path. The tracking dog started at the intersection near the bar, but within minutes it became disoriented, unable to follow any clear route toward Uptown, completely contrary to other missing person cases of the period. The K-9 was then led along the main streets Elias usually took, but still showed no strong signals, further supporting the possibility Elias never left the warehouse district to head home. The search team had to repeat the entire route 3 times, each time expanding to adjacent areas, but results remained 0. High-traffic intersections were checked multiple times because police believed the lone young man walking at night would likely have been seen by someone. Yet every witness questioned could provide no information related to Elias. At a gas station, the night shift employee recalled serving a few regulars but no one matching Elias's description. A 24-hour convenience store noted no suspicious or unfamiliar customers from 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. Even the route Elias sometimes took to buy cigarettes showed no matching activity at the time of his disappearance. When investigators cross-referenced all data collected from the Uptown grid, they identified a clear common point. No one, no device. No trace indicated Elias had ever left the warehouse district to return home. The K-9 picked up no scent. Witnesses saw nothing. His familiar locations showed no unusual impact, and his personal items appeared nowhere along the route. The end-of-day report showed that the search along Elias's usual daily route not only failed, but confirmed something crucial. Elias clearly did not head toward Uptown after leaving the bar. Instead, all evidence pointed to the hypothesis that he went deeper into the warehouse district on the night he vanished. This led the investigation team to conclude that the possibility of Elias returning home was 0, marking a major turning point in the investigation direction and forcing NOPD to shift the entire search focus away from Uptown to concentrate fully on the warehouse area, where darkness and empty spaces had become key factors in tracing his final footsteps. On the morning of the 3rd day since Elias Moran disappeared, a NOPD patrol team sweeping along the warehouse district discovered a silver, early 1970s Chevrolet Nova parked tight against the wall behind warehouse row number 5. A spot rarely noticed and seldom used for personal vehicles at night. After checking the license plate, they confirmed it was Elias's car, a discovery immediately regarded as a major turning point in the search effort. What first raised suspicion for the patrol team was how the car was parked. It wasn't neatly in any natural space but pressed right against the brick wall, front facing inward, rear toward the narrow access lane leading to the loading area, as if someone wanted to obscure the vehicle from the view of anyone passing along the main South Peter Street. Moreover, the left front wheel was angled slightly toward the wall, a sign the car had been stopped hastily, or the driver had no intention of returning to readjust it. There was no streetlight nearby, only faint light leaking from a flickering industrial bulb, making the area perfect for hiding a vehicle without drawing any attention. Upon opening the car door, investigators noted the driver's seat was pushed back farther than the position Elias normally used, according to details previously provided by the family. This was a small but highly unusual detail since Elias was of modest height and always adjusted the seat forward close to the steering wheel when driving. On the floorboard of the passenger side, police found an old receipt from a diner about 10 blocks away, but the family insisted Elias had not been in that area recently. The glove compartment still contained Elias's wallet with cash and identification inside, ruling out robbery. However, the car keys were lying on the passenger seat rather than in the ignition or his pocket, a placement difficult to explain if Elias himself had parked the car there. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken glass, no drag marks or blood inside or outside the vehicle, but the absence of Elias's essential items, especially the watch he always wore and the small notebook he usually carried, further heightened police suspicion. Meanwhile, the trunk was almost completely empty except for a thin jacket showing no signs of struggle. Outside the car, the ground bore unfamiliar tire tracks, not matching the Chevrolet's tires and indicating another vehicle had stopped in the area, possibly before or after Elias's car was parked. The technical team noted these tracks headed toward an infrequently used access road into the storage area, adding the possibility that a second vehicle played a role in delivering or picking up someone. When the investigation team compiled the scene observations, they quickly suspected the parking spot was not one Elias would have chosen on his own. First reason, Elias had never parked in the warehouse district at night, according to family and friends. Second reason, the parking position was too concealed, inconsistent with Elias's cautious nature and slight fear of the dark. Third reason, the keys left on the passenger seat, rather than in any conventional placement, suggested the person who parked it was either unfamiliar with or indifferent to the owner's habits. From there, the team began considering the possibility that the car was a secondary scene, meaning Elias may have been taken or met trouble elsewhere before his vehicle was moved here to mislead. To test this hypothesis, police expanded the investigation radius to 3 blocks around the car's location, combing every side passage and every entrance to warehouses still in use or abandoned. Many warehouses at the time were temporarily leased by private companies, but several had stood vacant for years, becoming shelters for casual laborers or the homeless and complicating the search. The team approached each warehouse manager requesting information on nighttime operations the night Elias vanished, lists of people present, and any vehicles entering or leaving the area. Notably, a night shift worker at warehouse number 7 recalled hearing a slow-running engine around 11:30 p.m. but did not hear a car door close or people talking. When asked to describe the sound, he said the engine didn't sound like an old car such as Elias's Chevrolet, but more like a light truck or pickup trying to run quietly to avoid attention. Another detail was recorded. Near Elias's car, there was a stronger than usual smell of motor oil, indicating a heavy-duty vehicle had been there not long before. This further supported the likelihood of a second vehicle being involved in the events leading to Elias's car being abandoned. While sweeping the area, police checked every large dumpster, every emergency exit along the sides of the warehouses, and even wall crevices where someone might temporarily stash items or evidence. Although no direct physical evidence was found, they discovered several scraps of paper blown near the parking area, including half a napkin from the bar where Elias met Caleb and Jonah, prompting police to note this could be coincidence or a sign that one of the 3 who left the bar had come this way. The search area was further expanded south to a row of old warehouses once used for construction materials. Many sections featured narrow passages obscured by tall wooden crates, creating blind spots where a person could easily hide or be forced through if threatened. Upon close inspection, investigators noticed a section of concrete floor with fresher shoe prints than the surrounding areas, though the shape was unclear for comparison to anyone. The discovery of the car, but no trace of Elias in the immediate radius, led police to lean toward the conclusion that this area served only as a drop-off point for the vehicle, not the initial site of Elias's trouble. The end-of-day report stated clearly the victim's vehicle appeared in a location inconsistent with his habits and travel patterns, Many details pointed to intervention by one or more other persons, and the warehouse district must be treated as a central focus of the investigation, with the search radius needing further expansion to determine Elias Moran's true direction of travel after leaving the bar. The discovery of Elias's car in the warehouse district caused T to shift the investigation focus to the last people seen with him, and in the first step of re-examining all information, the team decided to summon Caleb Hargrove to compare his statement against the new facts. In the interview, Caleb insisted he left the bar around 10:30 p.m. and went straight home, but when investigators pressed for a detailed account of his departure, Caleb gave only vague time points that shifted under closer questioning. Initially, he said he left after a brief exchange with Elias, but in a second interview session the same day, he claimed the entire evening had no memorable conversation. When cross-checked against statements from bar staff and patrons, the team noted that Caleb's departure time was not 10:30 as he claimed, but closer to 10:40, and his manner of leaving was described as more hurried than usual. Beyond the timing discrepancy, Caleb also could not provide a reasonable explanation of how he traveled after leaving the bar. He said he walked a short distance, then caught a taxi, but could not recall the pickup location or provide the driver's name or any related information. Checks with taxi companies operating that night found no record of any ride matching Caleb's description, making his statement inconsistent and raising numerous questions for investigators. After concluding the initial interview with Caleb, T summoned Jonah Ellis to clarify his departure time from the bar, as prior witness accounts showed significant discrepancies with Jonah's initial statement. In the session, Jonah said he left the bar shortly after Caleb around 10:45 p.m. and walked to the streetcar stop to catch the last ride home. However, this did not align with a regular bar patron who insisted he saw Jonah still inside after 11 p.m. Additionally, the nearby air conditioning repair shop owner described a young man resembling Jonah passing through the warehouse area around 11:20. When confronted, Jonah appeared flustered and claimed his memory was poor, even suggesting he might have misread his watch, leading investigators to note this as a noteworthy inconsistency. Beyond the departure time discrepancy, Jonah could not clearly confirm his route home, and like Caleb, he provided no witness to verify he actually went in the direction he described. When the team placed the two statements side by side, they quickly saw that both Caleb and Jonah failed to provide a clear and logical timeline for the night Elias disappeared. Caleb shifted time points with each question, while Jonah offered a sequence of illogical information that matched no other account. When compared to the timeline constructed in Part 3, the team observed that the period from 10:40 to 11:20 contained many gaps no witness could verify, and that was precisely the final window when Elias was last seen. The fact that the two friends last seen with Elias had statements that did not match each other or multiple other sources led investigator Sergeant Torn LeBlanc to note in the report that there is a possibility important information has been intentionally omitted or distorted, thereby shifting the case focus to an elevated investigation rather than continuing to treat Caleb and Jonah merely as information providers. Listed points of suspicion included: Caleb could not recall the exact departure time. Caleb's claimed route home matched no data. Jonah's time was off by at least 20 to 30 minutes compared to witnesses. Jonah appeared near the warehouse district at a time he claimed to be heading to the streetcar stop. And finally, neither could explain why Elias went toward the warehouse district, something they said they didn't know, but could offer no reasonable explanation for. Summarizing all these discrepancies, NOPD concluded that the statements of both Caleb and Jonah not only contradicted each other, but also failed to align with any objective facts gathered in the first 3 days of the investigation. This forced the team to record that the victim's two close friends were no longer just witnesses in the case, but had become genuine subjects of interest. With the level of suspicion significantly increased and subsequent steps in the file needed to move into a phase of deeper examination of their behavior, statements, and potential direct involvement in the timing of Elias Moran's disappearance. Immediately after completing the initial interviews with Caleb and Jonah and recording the significant level of contradiction in their statements, NOPD moved to a detailed on-site survey of the warehouse district, the area where Elias's car was found and regarded as the center of all suspicion. Investigators began by identifying warehouses within the closest radius around the parking spot, using the city's infrastructure maps and updated planning department data to mark structures with entrances suitable for one or more people to move through at night. Within a 200-meter radius of the Chevrolet Nova, there were 7 warehouses in total. Numbers 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 12, and 14, of which only 3 were recorded as operational at the time Elias vanished. The rest were abandoned or used only for temporary material storage. Police prioritized surveying the inactive warehouses, as those were the most likely sites for illicit activity to go unnoticed and for evidence to be concealed. During the inspection of warehouse number 5 directly behind the parking spot, the team discovered long, smooth streaks on the cement floor near the roll-up door, forming unnatural drag lines suggesting a heavy object had been pulled across recently. Some older streaks had been blurred by rain, but the fresher ones remained distinct due to a thin layer of dust on the surface. Outside the right side door of the warehouse, police also noted shoe prints that did not match the type Elias usually wore. The impressions were fairly large, with square sole edges, appearing to be work boots or industrial footwear. Although not clear enough to identify brand or exact size, these prints appeared repeatedly in the same direction of travel, from the wall-adjacent area to near a row of old wooden crates by the warehouse door. The technical team photographed and measured them in detail for the case file analysis. Continuing to warehouse number 7, the only one in the area with a night shift attendant, police recorded a narrow rear passage leading to a small road running straight to warehouse number 14. On the dirt surface of this passage, there were lightly disturbed sections as if something had been swept across, creating irregular curved lines. These sweep marks did not match tire tracks, did not match shoe prints, and lacked clear geometric patterns, only suggesting a hard-surfaced or angular object had been dragged or pulled here. Investigators did not rule out strong wind or loading activity as causes, but the concentration of marks around 3 closely grouped points required them to flag it as suspicious. Moving on to survey warehouse number 14, a building farther away but directly connected by side passages in the area. The team recognized it as the most anomalous point in the entire warehouse district. Up to that survey moment, the warehouse's front was chained off with rusted chain, but the side door showed nearly fresh scratch marks, signs someone had recently attempted to or succeeded in opening it. On the door was a thin layer of dust, disturbed into 2 parallel horizontal lines, suggesting something had rubbed against it when opened. The ground in front of the side door had 3 deeper footprints than the surrounding soil, as if someone standing there carried heavy weight or stood for a prolonged time before rain softened the surface and caused sinking. Investigators measured the distance between the footprints and determined their direction of travel led back toward warehouse number 7, opposite the main entrance. Beside the side door area, the team also found a faint drag streak running along the cement floor, extending about 3 meters from the door before disappearing into the warehouse darkness. Though not clear enough for direct confirmation, this drag mark matched the style of the ground sweep marks found on the passage between warehouses 7 and 14, drawing special attention from the team. Additionally, a large metal drum placed against the wall of warehouse 14 showed signs of recent movement, fresh indentations in the ground beneath its feet that did not match the other drums in the row. Police suspected it might have been used to conceal a secondary entrance or temporarily hide items. A deeper interior check of warehouse 14 could not be conducted immediately without the property owner's consent, but every exterior trace indicated it could be the most significant point in the entire area. When compiling observations from warehouses 5, 7, and especially 14, NOPD began forming a clear assessment. There was a sequence of unusual movement around these 3 warehouses near the time Elias disappeared, with multiple traces suggesting the presence of a heavy object dragged or relocated to various positions. The direction of these traces also aligned with a possible path starting from Elias's car location and ending near the side door of warehouse 14. With a sufficient degree of correspondence to establish reasonable suspicion, the team recorded warehouse number 14 as a potential incident site, a location possibly directly related to Elias Moran's disappearance and requiring priority for in-depth examination in the next investigative steps. The designation of warehouse number 14 as a priority survey site prompted NOPD to expand a search to the entire Riverside area, because if a struggle or unusual movement occurred that night, the Mississippi River could easily have been exploited by the perpetrator to dispose of evidence or even a body. With the traces around the warehouses not yet clear enough to draw conclusions, sweeping the riverbank became an essential part of the investigative strategy. The very next day, NOPD coordinated with the New Orleans Coast Guard to conduct a search along the river edge from the Crescent City Connection Bridge to the southern industrial dock area. The Coast Guard team used patrol boats moving slowly close to the shore, while investigators closely observed the water surface, bridge pilings, wooden posts, and whirlpool spots areas that often accumulate floating debris or snagged objects. In 1975, underwater search technology was limited, but the Coast Guard was still equipped with a low-frequency sonar specialized for detecting large objects or unusual structures on the riverbed. Though its resolution was poorer than modern devices, the sonar could still detect solid masses larger than 40 to 50 centimeters, suitable for scanning for any foreign objects lying close to the bank or in shallow water. During the search lasting more than 3 hours, the sonar recorded a few faint returns, but all were identified as large logs, old boat fragments, or industrial debris that had sunk long before. Supporting divers also checked areas prone to snagging objects, especially deep grooves near loading docks, but found no signs related to Elias or any unusual event near the time of his disappearance. Small fragments, metal cans, or cloth bags recovered during the inspection bore no connection to the case. On shore, another investigation group swept anchor points, old dock access pads, and broken railings, looking for signs of resistance or items someone might have dropped, but all areas tested negative. There were no scrape marks, no personal items, no fresh footprints, and no witnesses reported seeing or hearing any suspicious noises along this stretch of riverbank on the night Elias vanished, except for a vague account from a night shift worker who heard a slow-running engine near the loading area. But the sound was not distinct enough to suggest someone falling into the water. The only noted sign was an unusual tidal fluctuation that shifted some water channels away from old riverbed features, but this was a natural phenomenon with no investigative value. When the second search concluded late that afternoon, the Coast Guard team leader reported that no foreign objects had sunk near warehouse number 14, nor were there signs of water disturbance typical of a large object falling in recently. This did not entirely rule out the possibility that Elias had been near the riverbank, but it provided no evidence to support this investigative direction. The empty search results pushed the case further into difficult territory. With no traces from the Uptown area, the warehouse district full of suspicions but insufficient evidence, and the Riverside showing no abnormalities, the investigation team faced an increasingly large information gap, while time continued to erode opportunities for new evidence. In the end-of-day report, Sergeant Tauso LeBlanc recorded a brief note. If Elias Moran ever appeared on the riverbank the night he disappeared, every trace was swept away by the Mississippi before we arrived. Immediately after the Riverside search yielded no promising signs, NOPD shifted to a new investigative direction by reviewing all of Elias Moran's communications in the 48 hours before his disappearance, treating this as a way to trace back the final interactions that might explain why he left the bar and headed into the warehouse district instead of returning to Uptown. Since 1975 had no cell phones, all communication data relied on home landlines, pay phones, and calls logged in the Central Exchange Registry. Investigator LeBlanc requested the technical unit to retrieve the Moran household phone log, which only showed call times for outgoing and incoming calls but not content. In the period from the afternoon of June 14 to the night Elias vanished, only 3 calls stood out, one from a classmate, one from Elias's workplace regarding his schedule, and an 8-minute call that occurred around 10:48 p.m., just over half an hour before Elias left the bar. When the phone number for this 8-minute call was checked, the exchange confirmed it belonged to Caleb Hargrove's residence. This was the first detail showing direct interaction between Elias and Caleb right before both were seen at the bar. To strengthen the communication picture, NOPD also requested phone logs from Caleb's and Jonah's homes. Jonah's home showed no calls incoming or outgoing in the relevant time frame, consistent with his statement that he arrived at the bar after finishing work and had no prior contact with anyone. However, Caleb's home log revealed that before the 8-minute call with Elias, there was also a short 2-minute call around 10:36 p.m., close to the time Caleb claimed he had left the bar. Caleb had not mentioned this call in his interview, and when cross-checked against witness statements that he left the bar around 10:40, police realized the call timing did not fit Caleb's described route. If Caleb made an outgoing call at 10:36 from home, then his claim of leaving the bar at 10:30 was incorrect. If he called from a payphone, he still had not explained why he omitted it. Notably, the 8-minute call between Elias and Caleb occurred during the time both were supposed to have met at the bar before Caleb left, prompting the team to question, did the call happen before they met or after they separated? When compared to the timeline in Part 3, where witnesses said Caleb left around 10:40, Jonah around 10:50, 11, and Elias after 11 foes, the time gap between the 10:48 call and Elias leaving the bar became significant. According to bar accounts, Caleb had left before Elias got up from the table, but the phone log showed they were still in contact during the period corresponding to Caleb's observed departure. This led to two possibilities. Caleb had not left the bar as he claimed, or he left but continued contacting Elias afterward, possibly to arrange meeting elsewhere. In either case, Caleb's initial statement did not match objective data. When this detail was cross-referenced with other key time points, the investigation team noted that the period between 10:40 and 11:20, when Elias was seen heading toward the warehouse district, aligned with the end of the call between the two. Elias leaving the bar alone right after this call raised suspicion that the call's content may have directly influenced Elias's decision to enter the warehouse area instead of heading to Uptown. From an operational standpoint, Caleb's communication data was anomalous in three ways. First, he never mentioned the 8-minute call in his statement. Second, the call timing contradicted his described timeline. And third, the call coincided with Elias's change in travel direction. While Jonah showed no suspicious contact, Caleb appeared at every critical juncture, present at the bar, leaving hurriedly, contacting the victim at a pivotal hour, and providing a statement inconsistent with witnesses. All of this led investigator LeBlanc to note clearly in the file that Caleb Hargrove was no longer just a routine subject of interest, but had become the primary POI, the primary potential suspect, in Elias Moran's disappearance. Although the communication data and discrepancies in Caleb's statements increasingly reinforced suspicion that he may have played a key role in Elias Moran's disappearance, NOPD could not advance further without any physical evidence showing Elias had been harmed, and this very gap caused the entire investigation to gradually stall through the remaining months of 1975. After completing all reasonable sweeps around the warehouse district, including passages, warehouses, parking lots, Riverside areas, and even spots frequented by the homeless police, still found no physical signs confirming whether Elias was alive or dead. No blood, no discarded personal items, no signs of struggle, and most importantly, no body. Under New Orleans criminal investigation procedures at the time, classifying a case as homicide and shifting to a criminal direction required objective evidence that a death had occurred. But in Elias Moran's case, beyond the abandoned car and conflicting statements, NOPD had nothing indicating Elias had been attacked or killed. The absence of a body turned everything into an equation without a solution. If Elias was dead, nothing proved it. If he was alive, no signs showed he had left voluntarily. The suspicions about Caleb were too weak for any arrest warrant, as legally, statement inconsistencies alone could not substitute for direct or indirect evidence of a crime. The call data between Elias and Caleb, though crucial for investigative inference, was insufficient for charges, as in 1975, there were no tools to pinpoint call locations, no recordings, and the conversation content could not be recovered. Investigator LeBlanc and the team had to face the reality that although the entire situation clearly indicated something highly abnormal had happened the night Elias disappeared, without physical evidence, every speculation could not reach the level of prosecution. After more than 6 months of sweeps, the internal summary report recorded that all initial investigative directions had been pursued. Searches along the Uptown grid, full checks of the warehouse district, Coast Guard coordination, witness interviews, timeline cross-referencing, communication analysis. But each direction lacked the most critical piece to reconstruct the full event. Meanwhile, time eroded the chances of new traces. Warehouses changed tenants, ground was disturbed. Shoe prints and drag marks faded under rain and wind, and those present the night Elias vanished gradually forgot key details. All efforts to expand into adjacent districts yielded nothing, and hospitals, shelters, and police stations reported no matches to Elias's description during that period. When investigators reviewed the entire file to decide next steps, they had to admit they could not generate sufficient probable cause to continue compelled interviews or seek deeper search warrants for Caleb or anyone else connected. Without a body, Elias's case was classified as suspicious missing rather than probable homicide, meaning investigative powers were limited by existing law. By early 1976, with no new data emerging, the file was moved to inactive status and ultimately, per NOPD procedure, placed into the cold case system, the group of unresolved cases that could still be reopened with new evidence. All evidence collected throughout the investigation, including photos of the car location, soil samples, photographed shoe prints, paper scraps found near the parking area, and the hand-annotated warehouse district map were packaged, sealed, and stored in NOPD Evidence Locker Number 3 under Case Code M75612. The conclusion report, signed by Sergeant LeBlanc, carried no optimistic tone, no body, no wounds, no direct witnesses, no sufficiently strong physical evidence, no prosecutable case. And although investigators still believe Caleb might hold some secret about the night Elias disappeared, they could not keep him under special surveillance without any new factors arising. Elias Moran's disappearance thus became one of the city's most enigmatic files. No traces, no leads, no resolution. When the file was closed and archived, no one on the team could have imagined it would take more than 3 decades for an unexpected event to break through the dust of years and bring the case back into the light. After Elias Moran's file was placed into cold case and remained dormant for nearly 3 decades, an unforeseen event, Hurricane Katrina in 2005, unintentionally became the catalyst that prompted a re-examination of the file. As floodwaters receded and NOPD's entire infrastructure had to be inventoried, many old file cabinets that were flooded or lightly damaged forced the force to digitize all paper records to prevent data loss. During the evidence locker review, the box labeled M75612, containing all documents related to Elias Moran's disappearance, was pulled from storage by the archives team, cleaned, resorted, and transferred to the digitization unit. Evidence collected in 1975, previously deemed insufficiently probative to continue the investigation, was now placed under the light of new forensic technology. Among this evidence, a sample of dark fabric fibers recovered from the backseat of Elias's car and sealed in a small bag since 1975, marked low relevance at the time, now drew attention from investigators in the cold case division. In the 1970s, fiber analysis relied only on simple microscopic comparison, yielding limited results incapable of truly linking evidence to a specific individual. But by 2006, New Orleans' forensic lab had the capability to analyze polymer structure, weave characteristics, and absorption spectra of fibers, allowing clear determination of origin and possible garment types. When the Elias case fiber sample was run through the new analysis system, results showed it belonged to a type of synthetic material common in 1970s work jackets, but with a distinctive weave pattern matching a product line that Caleb Hargrove had been documented owning in. An old family photo obtained in the file. Though this finding was not sufficient to identify an individual, it indicated the fiber sample was highly unlikely to belong to Elias, as his clothing habits described by family did not include jackets of similar material. This coincidence drew cold case investigators' attention, especially since the fibers were found on the back seat, a place Elias rarely sat in his own car. However, per legal regulations, such a speculative forensic result could not form the basis to reactivate the file or consider anyone a suspect. The investigator reviewing the file concluded that the fiber sample warranted note but was isolated, lacked supporting legal context, and could merely result from ordinary contact before Elias disappeared. Thus, the file was not reopened but moved to the active monitoring category of the cold case division, meaning the case would not be reactivated but would be monitored and compared against any future new information. All evidence, including the fibers, car location photos, warehouse floor soil samples, and original reports, was resealed to new standards and returned to cold storage for long-term preservation. The final report from this phase stated clearly, current technology shows some evidence potentially linked to a former person of interest, but insufficient legal basis to change file status. Though it brought no breakthrough, the post-Katrina reanalysis placed Elias Moran's case in a state of readiness for unexpected developments if a new lead ever emerged. In 2009, more than 3 decades after Elias Moran disappeared, the city of New Orleans undertook a large-scale project to rehabilitate the old drainage canal system running through the warehouse district and extending near Julia Street, where many sections had silted up after successive storms. On a morning in early April, as the dredging crew operated the excavator to clear more than a decade of accumulated mud, the metal bucket struck an unusually hard object, producing a sound distinctly different from the broken concrete chunks and wood fragments they typically encounter. When the bucket was raised, amid the thick gray sludge, fragments of human bones darkened by time emerged. The crew immediately halted all operations and reported to the site supervisor, who then contacted NOPD per protocol. The area was cordoned off within less than 10 minutes, and the crime scene investigation unit, along with the forensic team, quickly arrived to conduct examination. The first bone fragments were identified as rib sections and part of a pelvis, mixed with mud and industrial debris. As the forensic team used small tools to separate the material, they discovered additional long bone segments, including forearm and femur, all at a decomposition level consistent with a body submerged in water for many years. The on-scene investigator immediately requested manual excavation expansion around the bucket stopping point, and after about an hour of work, they found a relatively intact skull. The canal section where the remains were snagged was only about 70 meters from Julia Street, in a low-flow stretch where a large object drifting from upstream could become lodged amid mud and rotted wood. Initial forensic analysis showed the skull had a large crack running from the temple down to the cheekbone, a sign of blunt force trauma and immediate shift in assessment from possible accident to suspected homicide. While collecting ancillary evidence at the scene, the team found an old leather bracelet less than 2 meters from the skull. The metal clasp was deformed, but the hand-engraved pattern was still recognizable. From the 1975 file, investigators knew Elias Moran regularly wore a bracelet given by his sister with a similar pattern. Shortly after, they also found a metal belt buckle segment and a rusted keychain hook with a small metal tag engraved with the initials EM, a detail that required no testing to clearly link the skeletal remains to the missing person in cold case file M75612. To precisely determine where the remains had lodged, the survey team used measuring lines and the new GPS marking system to map the location. Through simulation, they concluded the body had likely drifted with the current from the upstream warehouse area before becoming snagged in this canal section due to slow flow and uneven bottom structure. This was an area previously considered a potential site in the 1975 search, but at that time the water was deep, turbid, and lacked modern detection technology, making close access nearly impossible. When the remains were transferred to the lab, forensics conducted preliminary morphological analysis, bone length, skull size, tooth wear all compatible with a male in his early 20s at time of death. Decomposition timeline matched the period of Elias's disappearance, though awaiting DNA results for positive confirmation. The degree of match between evidence and victim file left virtually no room for other possibilities. The cold case investigator assigned to the file was contacted the same day, and just hours after forensics determined a high probability the remains belonged to Elias Moran. The file was officially upgraded from cold case to active homicide investigation. The discovery of the body not only ended 34 years of ambiguity, but immediately restarted the entire investigative process at high priority, as the disappearance had now become a murder case requiring a full re-examination from the beginning, starting with the question NOPD had been unable to answer for decades. What really happened to Elias Moran on that June night in 1975? At the NOPD Forensics Lab, the skeletal remains found near the Julia Street Canal were quickly entered into modern forensic analysis procedures to determine identity and cause of death, and within just a few days, initial results began reshaping the entire case that had seemed long forgotten for more than 3 decades. Tooth and bone samples were sent to the Louisiana State DNA Lab, where genetic material analysis technology had far surpassed what investigators had available in 1975. There, techniques for extracting DNA from long submerged bones were applied, and although cellular structure had significantly degraded, the lab still obtained a DNA sequence long enough for comparison. When reference samples from Elias Moran's parents preserved from a test in the 1990s were entered into the system, the results showed direct genealogical match with over 99.99% reliability, confirming the remains were Elias's. This was indisputable legal proof, ending all remaining doubts about the victim's identity and paving the way for reconstructing the cause of death using modern forensic methods. When the Forensic Anthropology Unit analyzed the skull and long bones, they noted a series of specific trauma marks inconsistent with a natural fall accident or prolonged drifting in water. On the skull, a large crack extending from the right temporal region down to the cheekbone indicated blunt force impact a heavy blow or strike with a hard object, likely causing immediate unconsciousness or death. The sharpness of the crack line and the pattern of bone collapse also helped experts determine the trauma occurred while the victim was alive, or at the moment of death, not from later water or mud pressure. The 7th and 8th ribs on the right side also showed compression fractures consistent with a strong impact against a flat surface or being dragged across hard ground. Based on impact modeling, the forensics team estimated the object delivering the force weighed at least 3 to 5 kilograms, with a blunt rather than sharp contact surface. Similar to industrial tools, a detail that particularly caught investigators' attention because warehouse number 14 and surrounding areas in the warehouse district contained many such items. In parallel with bone analysis, the city's hydrology survey team was tasked with remapping the flow of the canal where the remains were found. Using 1970s water flow data and recent renovation maps, they determined the recovery location was not where the victim entered the water, but where the body drifted to and lodged due to the canal bed structure. The canal's flow connected directly to the industrial drainage system from warehouse numbers 14 and 7, where wastewater discharged before joining the main channel. When simulating a human body entering the water from this area, the model showed over 80% likelihood the remains would follow the second branch and lodge exactly at the spot where Elias's skeleton was found, especially under the heavy rain conditions recorded. Meteorologically, on the night of disappearance in 1975, this created a direct link between the body discovery site and warehouse number 14, previously flagged for multiple anomalies. Combining both lines of analysis, skeletal forensics, and hydrology, the investigation team concluded Elias Moran did not fall into the water on his own, but died before his body was placed in the current. This was reinforced by the absence of any natural destruction, explaining the skull crack and other injuries. Soil samples found on the bones also matched sediment from the concrete floor of warehouse number 14, more than riverbank sediment, indicating the body likely contacted warehouse ground or surfaces before being moved outside. The forensics team also ruled out traffic accident impact or fall from height, as the force distribution on the bones did not match injury patterns from either type of accident. The expert report recorded that Elias's fatal trauma came from a blow to the head from the right side, likely in the context of a struggle or surprise attack, with conclusions based on physical evidence. The forensics file classified the cause of death as homicidal violence due to blunt force trauma, a manner of death that appears only with external violent force. This meant Elias Moran's case was no longer an unsolved mysterious disappearance, but officially reclassified as homicide. When the report reached the Cold Case Division, it marked the most significant turning point since 1975. After 34 years, there was irrefutable evidence that Elias had been assaulted, died from violent force, and his body was removed from the initial scene before being disposed of in flowing water near warehouse number 14. All modern forensic data converged on one unified conclusion. This was not an accident, not a voluntary departure, but a genuine criminal act requiring investigation as murder. When the 2009 forensics report confirmed Elias Moran died from violent blunt force impact and his body was moved from the scene before being placed in water near warehouse number 14, NOPD immediately resummoned the two suspects previously considered key witnesses in the 1975 file, Caleb Hargrove and Jonah Ellis. This round of re-interviews was not aimed at reconstructing the night of Elias's disappearance from their hazy 30-year-old memories, but to directly confront their old statements with modern forensic data, forcing both to face details they could no longer deny. Caleb was summoned first. In the session, investigators presented a copy of his 1975 statement and asked him to re-explain the entire timeline, especially why he left the bar earlier than the others and what happened afterward. Caleb repeated the familiar story. He left the bar around 10:30, did not see Elias after that point, and went straight home. However, when investigators presented forensic results showing Elias died from a heavy blow to the head and that water currents carried his body from warehouse number 14 to the canal recovery site, Caleb appeared flustered, something he had never shown before. When asked if he had gone near the warehouse area after leaving the bar, Caleb answered no, but with hesitation. And when confronted with the detail that the final call between him and Elias occurred exactly when Elias was seen leaving the bar toward the warehouses, Caleb fell silent and avoided eye contact. Investigators continued by presenting the fiber sample recovered from Elias's car in 1975 reanalyzed post-Katrina and likely matching the type of jacket Caleb commonly wore at the time. Caleb denied ever entering Elias's car after leaving the bar, but when asked why the fibers were on the back seat, a place Elias rarely sat, Caleb could offer no reasonable explanation, only saying he didn't remember clearly because so much time had passed. Contradictions became clearer when Caleb tried to explain that if any struggle occurred, Elias might have been attacked by someone else in the warehouse district. But this inadvertently contradicted his earlier assertion that he left the area immediately after leaving the bar. Caleb's shifting descriptions of possibilities led investigators to record this not as memory vagueness, but as adjustment of statements to evade undeniable forensic data. Jonah was summoned immediately afterward. Unlike Caleb, Jonah entered the interview room with caution and anxiety, but without feigned confidence. When re-asked about his 1975 departure route, Jonah stuck to his old statement that he headed toward the streetcar stop. But when investigators reminded him that a witness had seen him near the warehouses around 11:20, Jonah showed strong hesitation. Investigators continued presenting the forensics report, especially details showing Elias was struck on the head with heavy force before his body was moved to warehouse number 14A. Jonah had denied any connection to in 1975. Faced with this evidence, Jonah suddenly changed demeanor. He began saying his memory might be wrong, that he might have seen Elias staggering or falling somewhere near the warehouses, a detail never in his original statement. When investigators pressed for clarification, Jonah stammered that he had seen a figure resembling Elias lose balance while walking near the warehouses, but was not sure if it was really Elias. This ambiguity prompted investigators to ask directly, "Are you hiding anything related to Elias being attacked?" Jonah immediately denied it, but his trembling voice and evasive demeanor showed he was under heavy pressure. When asked if he saw Caleb and Elias leave the bar together, or if any struggle occurred between them before leaving the area, Jonah dodged the answer and only said, "Everything happened too fast." Jonah's sudden introduction of Elias losing balance, while forensics proved the head injury could not result from a simple fall, further increased suspicion that he was trying to re-describe the event in a less incriminating way. This was noted in the report as a sign Jonah might be covering for someone or concealing his own role. At the conclusion of both interviews, NOPD clearly determined one thing: neither Caleb nor Jonah still stood on their 1975 statements, and both were unable to provide explanations consistent with the 2009 forensic conclusions. Instead, they presented new contradictions, abnormal changes in details, and logical gaps that led investigators to conclude with certainty that the case involved an assault leading to death, and the last people to see Elias Moran were concealing part of the truth. After re-interviewing Caleb and Jonah and recording a series of new contradictions that could not be explained by memory drift after more than 3 decades, NOPD shifted focus to assessing motive and the relationships among the three in the period leading up to Elias Moran's disappearance, to determine whether any underlying conflict could have led to violent behavior. The original 1975 file only recorded superficial information about the close friendship among Elias, Caleb, and Jonah, but did not delve into social interactions or internal conflicts because the case had not yet been classified as criminal at the time. When the Cold Case Division reopened this group of documents in 2009, they started with old interviews, investigator notes, and some sideline statements previously deemed insufficiently important for the main investigative direction. From there, they compiled a more detailed picture of the dynamics among the three, showing their friendship was close but not entirely balanced. Elias was steady and well-liked. Caleb stood out socially, often making decisions and potentially pressuring others. Jonah tended to play the middle role, easily influenced and less likely to confront. Some old acquaintances re-interviewed in 2009 recalled arguments between Elias and Caleb related to work and personal plans, though no one knew exact details. Elias was said to have wanted to back out of a small business proposal from Caleb, a plan Caleb reportedly viewed as an important opportunity. When Elias withdrew, Caleb was said to have reacted strongly, suspecting Elias did not trust him and damaging their relationship. This information, though not direct evidence, showed a simmering conflict sufficient to create tension, especially in the context of their meeting the night Elias disappeared. Jonah, when re-interviewed, while not admitting conflict, inadvertently revealed that Elias and Caleb had not talked much in the weeks before the event, directly contradicting his 1975 statement that everything among the three was normal. This shift led investigators to assess that Jonah might be avoiding stating the true level of tension in the group. Additionally, the 2009 investigation highlighted that Jonah's presence near the warehouses at the exact time Elias was likely assaulted could not be considered coincidental, especially since he himself mentioned in the re-interview seeing Elias lose balance, a detail conflicting with forensic data proving Elias's head injury could not result from a fall. This reinforced the hypothesis that Jonah knew more than he admitted, or at least witnessed what happened between Elias and Caleb, but had concealed it for 3 decades. When cross-referencing all data, NOPD concluded that the motive for violence most likely stemmed from personal conflict between Elias and Caleb, possibly related to an argument on the night of the incident. Investigators analyzed that the power structure in the trio could lead to an explosive conflict. Caleb was easily provoked and tended to dominate, while Elias rarely backed down once decided. Jonah played mediator, but was easily swayed and reluctant to intervene strongly. This presented a plausible scenario. During a tense exchange in the warehouse district, away from streetlights and witness view, a physical struggle could have led to Elias being struck hard on the head, causing death. NOPD also assessed that Caleb's personality fit the profile for an impulsive reaction in an argument, while Jonah, based on his wavering statements, may have played the role of witness or inadvertently assisted in covering consequences, though not necessarily the direct perpetrator. Investigation notes further emphasized that Elias leaving the bar alone right after his call with Caleb and heading toward the warehouse district suggested an arrangement or follow-up meeting between the two, something Caleb had never admitted. From analyzing the full relationships, pre- and post-incident behavior, reactions during re-interviews, statement inconsistencies, and forensic results, the investigation team reached an operational conclusion that internal conflict among the three, especially between Elias and Caleb, was highly likely the direct cause of physical confrontation, and thus Elias Moran's death. After completing motive analysis and re-evaluating all historical statements, the investigation team realized direct questioning of Caleb Hargrove would not yield a breakthrough because for over 3 decades he had consistently maintained denial while demonstrating strong control over his statements in formal settings. Therefore, the Cold Case Division coordinated with the FBI New Orleans field office to develop a special operational plan, a form of sting operation modeled after the Canadian Mr. Distas. Big technique, but adapted to comply with U.S. legal standards and federal operational frameworks. The campaign's goal was to gradually lead Caleb to believe he was being approached by a criminal organization capable of cleaning up trouble and handling old problems, creating a context in which he would voluntarily disclose information about the night Elias Moran disappeared without feeling coerced or interrogated. The first phase involved establishing an undercover agent under the cover of someone involved in shady but not overly dangerous business to avoid alerting Caleb. The undercover agent, internally called Grant, began by approaching Caleb at an auto repair shop where Caleb worked in 2009. Based on habit surveillance data collected by the Cold Case Division over several weeks, Grant created a scenario needing urgent undercarriage repair for a broken-down vehicle, then proactively drew Caleb into informal conversations, forming a loose but friendly acquaintance. Criminal psychology agents monitored the process, assessing Caleb's reactions to small situations to adjust tactics. After about 4 weeks of interaction, Caleb began trusting Grant, viewing him as someone non-judgmental and seemingly living outside the law in a practical way. When Grant mentioned having a group that could help resolve minor legal issues like debts or administrative troubles, Caleb showed interest. At this point, the investigation team began constructing a fully controlled, simulated criminal environment, including multiple supporting characters, all undercover agents appearing at strategic moments to reinforce Grant's credibility and the organization behind him. A meeting was staged at an abandoned warehouse south of New Orleans, where Grant brought Caleb to introduce Sidework, actually to expose him to other members of the fake organization. The scene was designed tense enough to feel like activity, not for the faint-hearted, but not threatening enough to make Caleb withdraw. In the third warehouse meeting, an agent, playing the manager, told Caleb about an incident Grant had faced years earlier and emphasized the group could handle things that kept him up at night. This was the priming step to draw Caleb into admitting something from the past. After that meeting, Caleb proactively asked Grant if the group could handle an old matter for him if he had accidentally gotten involved in something long ago. Grant reported back, and the tactical team decided to advance to Phase 2, leading Caleb to believe that for the group to help, he had to tell the truth so they could assess risk. The decisive meeting was staged in a hotel room rented under a false identity, equipped with secret audio and video recording to ensure evidence collection met legal standards. Grant began by sharing a fabricated secret of his own to build trust and psychological similarity. He then told Caleb directly that if Caleb had something similar, he should share it to avoid being seen as a risk by the group. Caleb was silent for about 2 minutes, then asked again whether everything he said would stay inside. Grant assured him, "Just this group, and we need to know to protect you." This was the pivotal moment the entire sting operation had been built toward. Caleb began recounting the night at the bar in 1975, repeating some details from the original file, but with a crucial change. He admitted that he and Elias had a heated argument in the warehouse district, and that Elias didn't stay on his feet when I pushed him. At that moment, Grant did not press, but let Caleb continue. His psychological strategy showed pressure would cause retraction. Caleb continued that he didn't think the push was hard enough, but Elias fell into the metal edge of a wooden pallet in warehouse number 14. This detail matched the bone analysis showing blunt force impact from a hard object, not freefall, as the injury angle fit head striking an edge. This was a forensic detail never released publicly. The match created exceptional evidentiary value. It proved Caleb could not have fabricated it. More importantly, Caleb stated that Jonah panicked and helped him drag Elias deeper into the dark area of the warehouse before the two discussed how to leave. In one segment of the conversation, Caleb said he didn't intend to kill Elias, but things went too far. This was regarded as an admission of behavior leading to death even without intent. After Caleb finished the story, Grant said the group could clean up remaining traces in the file, but needed Caleb to confirm the exact location. Caleb took the map Grant provided and marked the area of warehouse number 14, along with the point near the riverbank where he and Jonah parted after leaving the scene. This detail continued to align with water currents carrying the body to near Julia Street after more than 3 decades. The conversation lasted nearly 3 hours and was fully recorded with clear audio, no signs of coercion, threats, or direct prompting of criminal behavior from the undercover agent's critical conditions for the evidence to hold legal value in U.S. proceedings. After the meeting, the investigation team analyzed the transcript and determined Caleb's narrative met the criteria for admission of involvement and contained many details matching forensic reconstruction, body location, evidence, as well as inconsistencies in Caleb's 1975 and 2009 statements. This was not a forced confession, but sufficient to be considered high-value circumstantial evidence, especially combined with modern forensic data. The sting operation concluded when Caleb agreed to participate in another job for the organization and was scheduled for another group meeting, at which point NOPD planned to make the official arrest, based on all evidence gathered from the campaign. After completing the analysis of the recording obtained from the undercover campaign, the investigation team proceeded to compile all layers of evidence from 1975 to 2009 to present to the Louisiana District Attorney's Office. The compilation consisted of 4 main groups: forensic reconstruction, cross-reference timeline across 3 periods, living witness statements, and data from the covert meeting. The forensic section included bone examination results showing blunt force trauma consistent with the description Caleb inadvertently revealed during the meeting with the undercover agent. Analysis of the body's lodging position, exactly matching the water flow path from warehouse number 14, the location Caleb marked on the map. The presence of fabric fiber samples from the type of jacket Caleb once owned, and the incompatibility of any samples with the self-exculpatory descriptions in the 1975 statements. The timeline section was divided into 3 columns: 1975 statements, 2009 analysis, and the narrative from the undercover campaign. When placed side by side, the dense mismatches between the old statements and the actual timeline became glaringly clear, while the account from the covert meeting precisely matched unpublished forensic traces. The living witness statements section, particularly Jonah Ellis's 2009 statement, when cross-referenced with new data, showed Jonah was present at the scene in the initial phase when Elias collapsed, though he did not directly inflict the injury. Jonah did not admit this in 1975 out of fear of being considered an accomplice. However, after the investigation team re-interviewed him in 2009 and presented the forensic findings establishing the direction of truth, Jonah proactively requested cooperation to avoid prosecution on related charges. Most critically, in the file presented to the prosecution was the audio and video recording of the sting operation. Caleb described the sequence of events in a way only someone present at the scene could know, particularly the description of the metal edge of the wooden pallet and the thud sound when Elias's head struck it, a detail matching the skull fracture pattern confirmed by the 2009 forensics. He also accurately described the position inside the warehouse where Elias collapsed, a spot the investigation team had noted faint drag marks on the cement floor during the 1975 survey. Notably, the statement, "I didn't think the push was that hard," was regarded as an admission of conduct leading to death even without intent, constituting second-degree murder under Louisiana law. When the prosecution reviewed the entire file, they concluded the evidence surpassed the probable cause threshold to issue an arrest warrant. The senior prosecutor assigned to the case signed the warrant for Caleb Hargrove on 3 charges: second-degree murder for conduct resulting in Elias Moran's death, obstruction of justice for intentionally concealing the incident, altering the scene and providing false statements, and evidence tampering for moving the body and erasing traces in warehouse number 14 before leaving. The arrest warrant was executed on the morning of Monday, September 14, 2009. 4 NOPD vehicles and 2 FBI support vehicles approached the repair shop where Caleb was working. He was handcuffed right at the reception area, offering no resistance but showing signs of shock when informed of the warrant's contents. The same day, Jonah was summoned as a key witness. After signing a cooperation agreement, he was placed under protective custody by authorities. Jonah's formal statement confirming the sequence of events on the night Elias disappeared helped the prosecution solidify the entire case structure, allowing the file to move to the formal prosecution phase. Caleb Hargrove's trial opened in May 2010 in Orleans Parish Criminal Court, becoming the focus of the entire city because it was the first time a disappearance from 1975 long thought forgotten had been revived through modern forensic technology and a U.S.-adapted Mr. Big-style Undercover campaign. On the very first day, the Louisiana prosecution presented the charging framework consisting of 3 main pillars of evidence: forensic reconstruction, the covert campaign recording, and a cross-reference timeline spanning more than 3 decades. The jury, composed of 12 members, was informed they would view documents never released publicly, including images of the skeletal scene, Mississippi River flow diagrams, fiber sample analysis results, warehouse number 14 maps, and especially excerpts of Caleb's recorded narrative of the night Elias Moran disappeared. The forensic reconstruction began with testimony from forensic expert Dr. Marlon Geary. He described the bone analysis process for Elias after the remains were found in the canal near Julia Street in 2009. Dr. Zabai, Geary pointed out the skull cracks, the direction of force, and the linear depressed fracture characteristic consistent with a hard impact against a sharp-edged, hard object rather than a free fall. When the prosecution displayed close-up images of the skull fracture on the screen, the jury focused and saw that the force angle matched the metal edge of wooden pallets commonly used in 1970s warehouse district warehouses, a type documented as still present in warehouse number 14 at the time Elias vanished. The prosecution continued by presenting a simulated diagram of the body's drift over nearly 3 decades, proving the lodging position in the Julia Street Canal was logical if the body initially entered the water behind warehouse number 14, where Mississippi waters seeped through auxiliary drainage systems and side channels. The jury heard that every other scenario was inconsistent, especially the possibility of Elias entering the water farther away. Only warehouse number 14 produced a drift sequence matching the 2009 endpoint. The prosecution then moved to the 1975 evidence reanalyzed post-Katrina. The fabric fiber sample found in Elias's car was presented as indirect but noteworthy evidence. Polyester material with a cross-weave pattern, commonly used in 1970s men's work jackets. When an image of Caleb's jacket from a 1974 photo was displayed, and the analyst compared the 2 weave samples under microscopic light, the jury observed a high degree of similarity, though not absolute certainty. The prosecution emphasized, not every fabric sample proves guilt, but it connects to Caleb's changing statements across stages. When the forensic portion concluded, the courtroom shifted to the most critical part, the undercover campaign recording. Lights dimmed, audio turned up, the recording between Agent Grant and Caleb played, replaying the original voice and tone from the 2009 conversation. "I didn't think the push was that hard," Caleb said in the recording, his voice weary but as if unburdening a secret. The prosecution replayed the segment where he described Elias not staying on his feet, striking his head on the metal edge of the pallet, the thud like a hollow pipe hitting iron. These details, according to the prosecution, matched the forensic reconstruction perfectly, especially the metal edge detail, which had never been publicly released. Next, the prosecution played the segment where Caleb described dragging Elias farther in, leaving him for a bit, and Jonah panicking, not knowing what to do. The prosecution paused the tape at the line, "We just wanted to get out of there before anyone saw." This segment left the entire courtroom in complete silence. Caleb sat at the defense table, hands clenched, not looking at the screen. Defense counsel objected, arguing the narrative in the sting operation resulted from psychological inducement and illusion of threat, but the judge overruled because no evidence showed coercion by agents and Caleb had voluntarily spoken when asked if he wanted to clean up an old matter. When the undercover portion ended, the prosecution moved to the 1975 to 2009, 75 to 2009 cross-reference timeline. A large chart was set up before the jury. First column 1975 Caleb statements. Second column 2009 forensic analysis. Third column undercover narrative. At each discrepancy point, the prosecution circled in red: time of leaving the bar, direction of travel from Canal Street, reason Elias left before or after the group, reason Caleb and Jonah did not head back to Uptown immediately after leaving the bar, time Elias was last seen, and especially Caleb's 1975 claim of no argument, directly contradicting the 2009 recording description. Next, the figure the entire courtroom awaited took the stand: Jonah Ellis. After being granted immunity for cooperation, Jonah testified. He confirmed that an argument occurred that night in the warehouse district, and that Caleb pushed Elias once, but Jonah at the time didn't think it was serious. He also admitted helping drag Elias inside warehouse number 14, though unaware Elias had fully collapsed. The prosecution asked, "Why didn't you tell the truth in 1975? Jonah replied, "I was afraid of being considered an accomplice, and I was wrong." The jury observed Jonah, seeing the weary honesty of someone who had carried a burden for 3 decades. Defense counsel tried to discredit Jonah's testimony by emphasizing his memory had eroded over time, but Jonah responded, "I haven't forgotten the sound of Elias's head hitting the metal bar. No one forgets that." The prosecution returned to forensics to match Jonah's account, with the bone data and the perfect alignment left the defense unable to rebut. After 4 days of arguments, the jury was sent to deliberate. 3 hours later, they returned. The foreperson stood, paper in hand. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Caleb Hargrove, guilty of second-degree murder, guilty of obstruction of justice, and guilty of evidence tampering." Caleb bowed his head. The courtroom fell completely silent. The 1975 disappearance case finally had its answer after 35 years through the combination of modern forensic science, special investigative tactics, and the weight of truth finally spoken in the 2010 courtroom. Caleb Hargrove's sentencing hearing took place in July 2010, 2 months after the jury returned guilty verdicts on all 3 counts. The courtroom was packed, not only because of the case's 35-year span, but because it was seen as a textbook example of how a seemingly hopeless cold case could be solved through the integration of scientific advances and modern investigative tactics. Judge Raymond Hall read the sentence in a low, clear, unwavering voice. For the offense of second-degree murder, defendant Caleb Hargrove is sentenced to 32 years imprisonment. For the offense of obstruction of justice, defendant is sentenced to 10 years imprisonment, to run concurrently with the principal sentence. For the offense of tampering with, destroying, or concealing evidence, a corresponding federal sentencing range is applied but consolidated into the total term of incarceration. The judge emphasized aggravating factors. Caleb not only caused Elias Moran's death, but concealed the truth for 34 years, seriously obstructing the justice system, moving the body, disposing of it at warehouse number 14, concealing the timeline, giving false statements in 1975 and 2009 interviews, and allowing Jonah to remain silent for decades, were elements proving intentional prolongation of legal consequences. Time does not erase responsibility, the judge said, and the court has a duty to ensure justice is not lost, no matter how long it takes. Caleb offered no final words, standing silently looking down while the Moran family quietly held hands. After the sentence was pronounced, not D, and the Cold Case Division summarized the entire investigative process, drawing lessons of significant operational value. The first internal report focused on why the 1975 case failed: lack of modern forensic technology, insufficient interagency coordination, and especially over-reliance on witness statements without adequate verification capability. The initial investigation lacked conditions to evaluate the warehouse district as a potential crime scene due to missing search tools, and evidence collection was hampered by the era's technical limitations. The 2010 investigators acknowledged that if modern forensic reconstruction had been applied from the start, the truth might have been uncovered decades earlier. The report also highlighted the pivotal role of 2009 forensics, DNA confirming victim identity, water flow analysis determining the body's initial area, bone examination providing injury type, fiber sample analysis from Elias's car clarifying contact, and behavioral reconstruction based on physical data, all transformed the case from an unanswered question into a structured criminal investigation. Operationally, the timeline was the second decisive factor. The 1975 file contained critical gaps that only became apparent when placed beside 2009 forensics and the undercover narrative. Investigators assessed, without the three-period cross-reference timeline, there was no way to expose the dishonesty in Caleb's and Jonah's statements. Reconstructing the marker's time of leaving the bar, car location, warehouse area, time of disappearance, and final call created a framework of truth into which all other information had to fit, thereby surfacing contradictions. The sting operation, the third factor, was recorded as the tactical turning point. Not only did it produce Caleb's narrative, but the account in the covert campaign matched unpublished forensic details exactly. This was proof Caleb could not have fabricated it, and that he was truly present at the moment Elias collapsed. The internal report identified the campaign as a model for undercover use in cold cases, emphasizing the importance of creating a non-coercive environment for the suspect to self-disclose information. Finally, from this case, NOPD revised and supplemented missing persons procedures. Every missing person case rated medium risk or higher must consider criminal possibility from the outset. Transit locations like the warehouse district must be evaluated as potential crime scenes, not just places the victim might pass through. All close friend statements must be rigorously cross-checked against objective data, and every cold case with suspicion elements must undergo periodic reanalysis with new forensic technology. The sentencing hearing closed with a clear message. Though justice may arrive late, it can still be delivered when technique, tactics, and persistence intersect at the right moment. With a 32-year sentence for second-degree murder and 10 years concurrent for obstruction of justice, Caleb Hargrove would spend the rest of his life in prison. For New Orleans' criminal investigation system, the Elias Moran case became proof that a minor 1975 missing persons file could still rewrite criminal history when science and professionalism advanced together. The story of the Elias Moran case, from an apparently routine 1975 disappearance to a 35-year journey to resolution, offers us a series of profound lessons relevant to contemporary American life, where trust in the legal system, technology, and community responsibility remains central. The detail that 1975 police had to rely on witness statements, lacked modern forensics, and ultimately let the case stall shows that even in a society that values the rule of law like the United States, the system can fail without persistent oversight and follow-through. In today's reality, similar oversights can still occur, especially in communities under resource constraints. The fact that Elias's remains were only discovered after Katrina, when the city was forced to re-inspect its entire canal system, reminds us that no detail is meaningless. In modern life, this reflects the importance of data storage, record-keeping, and infrastructure investment, because sometimes the seemingly auxiliary tools unlock the truth. The 2009 DNA technology and forensic reconstruction prove that science is not just a tool but hope for families of the missing, a message very close to U.S. reality, where tens of thousands of cold cases still await resolution. The Mr. Big-style undercover campaign succeeded only because it was executed with caution, legal transparency, and respect for human rights, an important lesson in an American society increasingly sensitive to abuses of power. And finally, the story reminds us that silence, as Jonah maintained for 34 years, can prolong pain for many others. In today's United States, where community spirit and civic responsibility are emphasized, speaking up when one knows the truth, however difficult, remains the foundation for justice to be served. If you want to continue following long-decade cold case journeys like Elias Moran's, hit subscribe so you don't miss any story. Thank you for joining me, and see you in the next video with more mysterious files waiting to be uncovered.